Good evening, everyone. I'm Sarannaya Bose, and I welcome you all to this panel discussion on cultural identity and ideology curated under TMYS review in association with Center for South Asian Studies, University of Hawaii. Under this theme, TMYS Review March 2023, we'll talk about language and provincial narratives. The topic for today is feminine, feminist, and female language. We are honored to have Professor Debali Mookerjea-Leonard and Shelly Bhoil ma'am as our esteemed speakers for the panel. Thank you for joining us. I shall now quickly introduce our speakers. Debali Mookerjea-Leonard is a gold medalist in comparative literature from Jadavpur University, Calcutta, and holds a PhD from the University of Chicago. She is a professor of English and World Literature at James Madison University. She is the author of Literature, Gender and Trauma of Partition, The Paradox of Independence, and the co-editor of Indian Partition in Literature and Films, and the translator of Sunil Gangopadhyay's novel, Rokto. Shelly Bhoil is a poet, editor, and scholar. Her most recent publications include two edited reference books on Tibet and an anthology of Tibetan exile poetry in Brazilian Portuguese translation. Her forthcoming works include her poetry books in Portuguese and Japanese translations. She belongs to the subcontinent and lives in Brazil. Now, without further ado, I'd like to request Professor Debali to please present her views on today's topic.
Thank you, Saranya. Thank you, TYMS, for this invitation. And also, Saranya, thank you for the generous introduction. The topic for today, feminine, feminist, and female language, is, of course, reflection on the work of Ellen Showalter. But I'm going to focus my talk on the Bengali poet Radharani Devi. In fact, today, 30th November, happens to be her 119th birth anniversary. She was born in 1903 and lived to 1989. So in talking about the feminine and feminist language, I'm going to actually talk about her poetry because it brings out so well the issues that are relevant to this panel. In early 1930, at a party hosted by the Bengali writer Swarnakumari Devi, Radharani was present. It was a literary meet in the form of a tea party. And at that meeting, the Bengali writer and critic Pramotha Chaudhuri commented that Bengali women writers actually imitated their male counterparts, and thus their writing was derivative. It was not authentic because it was so influenced by what men were writing. Radharani Devi actually disputed his claim. And because she made the claim that there were male and female personas in the writer. It's something actually Virginia Woolf has also claimed. But Pramotha Chaudhuri remained unconvinced. So Radharani then set about giving the critic what he asked. She decided to give him a feminine voice. And she embarked on this literary experiment where she adopted the name Opurajita Devi. Opurajita, on the one hand, it means the undefeated woman. It is another name for the demon-slaying goddess Durga. And Opurajita is also the name of flowering vine with beautiful blue flowers. And in a way, the name reflects, it's sort of suggestive of both strength as well as beauty and tenderness. And she set about writing poetry about women. All of her poems are, the speakers are always women. These are dramatic monologues that she wrote. And they focus, the characters are, they range from new brides, young women in love, women having a conversation in a dorm, um, or in a women's hostel, uh, women, jealous sisters-in-law, dishwashing maids, sari sellers, women who the gossiping socialites, etc. And they present in a very colloquial voice the everyday world of the uh, Bengali woman. And I'm going to give you an idea of what Aparajita Devi's poetry sounds like. I should make it clear that Radharani, from 1930 to 90, it was only until 1937 that Aparajita continued to compose her poems. She wrote 4 books of poetry. Uh, Buker Bina, Heart's Lute, uh, Anginar Fool, Courtyard Flowers, Purobashini, Women in the Family, and Bichitru Rupini, The Many Faces of Woman. And while Radharani's poetry, she has 3 books of poems, beginning in 1929 with Leela Komal. The second book of poems is a set of sonnets dedicated. It's really celebrating her marriage to Narendra Dev. And the third book of poems, Bon Bihogi. The second book of poems is actually called Shithimor, Head Ornament. And the third book of poems is Bon Bihogi, or Wild Birds, which was published a year after Aparajita's last collection, Bichitra Rupini, where, The Many Faces of Woman. And so Aparajita's works are actually bookended by Radharani's poetry. Having said that, I want to talk a little. I'm going to talk a little bit about Aparajita first. I'm going to talk about Radharani as well, but Radharani's poetry, that is. But I will talk about Aparajita's poetry a little because I want to give you a sense of what it means to write in a feminine fashion, in a deliberately feminine fashion. And Aparajita's poems were wildly popular. Her poetry was it sort of was absolutely something very, very new in the landscape of Bengali poetry and Bengali women's poetry. And I want to talk about that. I'll give you the context of the poems, of course. And then I will move on to talk, to set her in comparison with other Bengali poets, including Radharani herself. And so the first poem I'm going to quote, this is actually my translation. And this is from her first collection, Buker Bina. And it's a wife who's upset that her husband has come home late. So she shuts the bedroom door. And then this conversation, I'm going to cite a brief excerpt from this. You knocked repeatedly. Bina, you called to me. Well, if you say so. I was sound asleep, you see. It isn't too late, just 11. Oh, sure, I can tell. For men, that's barely twilight. So, of course, all's well. Meet the wife at sundown? That'll never happen to me. Happy on earth are menfolk, race of the honeybee. Been working all evening. Oh, please do tell me more. Your nonsensical babble makes my anger sore. And I can see I'll probably be running out of time. So without much ado, I'm going to go on to the next poem, which is titled Janmudin or Birthday. This is also from her first collection, Mookerjea-Leonard. And in this, a young woman, Ila, is trying to decide on her birthday attire. Uh, she is this is a woman's space. She's surrounded by her siblings, her friends, etc., and she's trying to decide on what she's going to wear for the party that's scheduled for that evening. So here it goes. The anato colored Kashmiri sari? No, that's not it. Hey, Bodhi, come, sweetie, and sit with us a minute. Tell them which sari looks most becoming on me. Maluti, wait. That wispy Georgette suit, I see. Black with cherry blossoms. Do you have no taste? Clearly, those art lessons on you were a waste. What's that, Bela? The red silver Benaresi sari? God, folks will snigger and call me a Marwari. Shezdi, what say you? The paddy green from Madras? You'll dress me like the cleaning crew. Think I'll pass. What? Haven't you seen Piru's daughter every morning? All wrapped up in paddy green, broom in hand sweeping? Tell me, Rangadi. Oh, stop laughing. There's little time. I have to shower, do my hair. Maybe I'll go just as I am. This is an excerpt from the first stanza. Here, this is an elite household, and she has certainly regional prejudices, as you can see in this one brief excerpt. But we soon find out that Ila is actually not looking for guidance from her friends or relatives, and that she's made up her mind. And the reason she's made up her mind is because there's someone coming, someone that she's expecting to meet at the party. And so the second stanza, and I'll quote another brief excerpt. Damn it, so many women, but none with good sense. Views plenty, taste not one. Are they really dense? Dug through my whole closet, but not once did they say, wear the royal blue with the thin gold border today. Samir Sen has such fine taste, a very discerning man. He is coming. My get-up must be as sublime as it can. A single strand of pearls and ruby bracelets I'll wear. My diamond studs like jasmine bouquets in the ear. A brooch, gold star pins on a chignon hanging low, coiled with a bokul chain, and I'll be ready to go. My blue sari, like the waves of the deep blue sea. The other day, I could tell that he liked it on me. So again, the poem continues, but I'm going to stop over here. What I'm trying to elaborate over here is, what makes her poems feminine? Is it because of her understanding of saris from different regions of India? Is it her discussion of her get-up, of her jewelry, etc.? But what stands out the most is the candor of this woman expressing herself, this young woman who is clearly attracted to this gentleman, Shomer Sen, how she is expressing herself. And this is something that was very new in Bengali poetry and expressed in a very feminine language. In fact, there will be discussions around her identity, because Aparajita, or rather, in fact, Radharani did not disclose Aparajita's identity. She had vowed when she started the experiment in 1930 to keep it a secret for 12 years. And she did not let anyone know that she was actually writing as Aparajita. In fact, she developed two different handwritings for her handwritten manuscripts to keep it secret even from her publisher. So anyway, for reasons of time, I have other excerpts, but I'm going to actually rush a little bit. And there, Aparajita's narrator's vocalization of everyday words delivered in ordinary language, voicing common people and circumstances, really blew a gust of fresh air over the serene, decorous landscape of Bengali women's literature. I mean, in the section that I just read from John Muddin, the woman is expressing herself and her love for her invitee Shomesh Shen. Unlike this kind of love poetry, Kamini Roy, who was one of the most renowned poets of her time, in her poem Pronoye Batha, The Pains of Love, would write, and these are also actually my translations: why are suffering and pain of despair entwined with earthly love forevermore? Why the lament? Why the falling tear? Why thorny ravines to love's door? Oh, why does fate interfere? Why not let their two lives blend? Insuperable hurdles rise before them. Why their separate paths in the end? Compared with this, or her poems about self sacrificing love, should my life's arc remain forever dark? Dearest, let it be so. If on your way, through night and day, lights endlessly glow. This is from her poem Panthajugal. What these Navanita Devshen, who actually happens to be Radharani Devi's daughter, in her introduction to Aparajita's poetry, Aparajita Devi Rachana Boli, the works of Aparajita Devi, would actually write that women preferred not to perform gender identity in their writings. They didn't want to be ghettoized as women writers because critics were regularly unfair towards women writers. So they refuse to perform gender identity. But as I'm trying to point out, Aparajita actually broke through these rules. Unlike Kamini Roy, Aparajita's writings clearly present a feminine persona. And I'm going to read just a little bit from Radharani. Radharani's poetry. This is separate from Aparajita. This is from her poem Jagrihi, which was published in the collection Bon Bihogi in 1938. And this is to bring out what I mean by her, by Radharani's feminism. So this is the poem that I'm going to read has a clear message for women. With coal-lined eyes, the idiom of allure you write, with light and shade of smiles and tears and trance. From them has faded hopes of an intellect bright, only restless illusions dance. Across the globe proceed the rites of learning, that noble labor, but you haven't sought your place at its arduous altar ever. Lifting the veil from your beauty, you have lost yourself in men pursuing frivolity. And then in the next stanza, she'll write, woman, he who stole your humanity, snatch his weapon. So Radharani would be described by Anoda Shankar Rai, a Bengali critic, as as someone who came into prominence through her impassioned feminism. He does not offer any appraisal of her literary craft. He just deems his observation about feminism, about her feminism, telling enough. Uh, anyway, suddenly I'm probably out of time. Am I not?
Yeah.
I have run out of time. So at this time, I'm going to actually, maybe we can talk about these things further in the Q&A. But for now, I'm going to stop here.
Thank you, ma'am. That was very interesting. The poems, the translations, absolutely lovely, beautiful to hear. Next, we'll move on to Shelly Bhoil, ma'am. Ma'am, please present your views on today's topic.
Okay. Thank you so much, Saranya. I do not know the Bengali pronunciation of your name. Can you please correct me?
Ma'am, it's Sharonna.
Sharona. Okay, thank you so much. So thank you so much, TMYS Academy, Kuldas Gupta, Sharanya, and my co-panelist Debali. It's really an honor to be here and to speak on this topic. Today, I don't speak as a scholar, but I speak as a writer and a women writer and a feminist writer I am not sure if I'm a feminine writer, but I am a female and I am a feminist, and that qualifies me to speak here in this panel. So I think I like to untangle these three terms that we have: female, feminine, feminist. From my own understanding and from what I have understood about these terms, from what I have read and learned, it's very important for us to understand that, as I think it's Elaine Showalter who talked about these terms and the three phases of being. So when we talk about female, what do we really mean? We mean the biology of a body, a female body. I am a female, and that's my biology, is my female self, right? When we talk about feminine, it has not necessarily much to do with my female body, because feminine is not about me as a female. Feminine is more about how society perceives me. So feminine is more of a social construct, it's more of a cultural construct. It is not necessary for a female to be feminine. Feminine could even be, even a male can be feminine. So it's very important to understand that all these feminine ideas that we have about women, feminine ideas about women being soft, subversive, docile, have certain qualities, good in home science. These feminine qualities are not necessarily things that you must expect of a woman. The expectation is, it's more about this culture and society than about the woman herself, about how she feels about herself. Then I'll come to the third term that we have is feminist. What is feminist? Feminist is the active phase of being a female, and understanding that female and feminine are two different categories. Like a Venn diagram, there can be some common space between these, but it is not necessarily so. So this is what I think it's very important to understand these three terms. And I'm going to now read some poems of mine that pertain to these three constructs and my writing as a woman. So I like you to yourself see where you can distangle the female from the feminine and the feminist, and see my writing. And yes, before I read my poems, I like to talk about also language. We are talking about also the female language here. So language is very gendered. Maybe language is not gendered because language is very flexible. It has always had a space, room for expanding itself, right? It's very porous. We always have new words coming in the dictionaries, but we have made it very gendered. Language is very, it's like gender is not just a binary. We don't have only male and female. We also have a third gender, but we have made language also very binary. And therefore it's very important to talk about language and gender. So now let me read my poems so that we can also have more time for discussion. So, okay, I'm going to read a poem, Blood Soaked. We have taboos about women menstruating. Women can't enter the temples, they can't enter the kitchen because she's impure, even when the blood that she's actually, the blood is very pure. So, most pure blood, we all know that. But we have these taboos. So, this poem is titled Blood Soaked. That's right. I carry between my legs a bag with a napkin soaked in blood. Wait, haven't I been carrying in me a fountain of blood since the first mother ever came on earth? Indeed, I am, oh goodness, an enduring river of blood. From a uterus urn, I flow in your veins. And you, where do you drain off your mother's blood each time you carry your bloodless body to the small shrine of your mind? So you would see that in this poem, I talk about the woman body, where we talk about the female, the biology. The next poem that I'm going to read, it's the indelible ink of December 16. This poem I wrote in memory of Nirbhaya, Jyoti Deshpande. And I thought it's a very good opportunity to read this poem because what happened to Jyoti, and that happens to many women across the world, it's something that's very important to talk about. I think any discussion that we have on gender, women, writing, it's very important to remember these women who have paid the price of being women. Okay, the indelible ink of December 16. And when you hear this poem, if possible, Professor, my colleague here, I would, since you are interpreting the poems, I would I would really would be very glad if later you can give me a feedback about how you see me writing this poem as a woman, and if you think a male could have written this poem using the same language. The indelible ink of December 16. On December 16, the day sleepwalks like dreams in languid night streets. And the night sleeps without the pleasure of oblivion. The world feels like a catacomb, rotting to its core, with its zombie residents, those whose hands move with ease from praying to praying and tearing apart threads of skin from a breathing, bleating, woven mass. Performing the living's sky burial, these vultures from a mistaken human culture. On December 16, the sun refuses to greet the city with its downcast eyes. And roads run into sand rivers where float fishes without fins. We all, with our paper wings, fly skywards, but dash against the pretend horizon, soaking the evening's menstrual blood. We come down falling, bone by bone, intestine robed, ligaments splitting like hair fall. A body, a body feasted upon by creatures of the wildest wind. On December 16, not too far away in a familiar sky, a moon was devoured slice by slice, and a lonesome star, and a lonesome star still moans, wishing upon stars from another sky, wishing upon stars from another sky to hide in the womb of a day yet unborn. Now, the third poem that I'm going to read is Letter to Fellow Women. So here you would see that a girl um, who's grown up to understand that all those feminine graces that are expected out of her are not really about her, but about society. So how she, must build a world of her own. So here, Letter to Fellow Women. Dear woman, are you spreading yourself out on the floor as a playmat? For that little, long, silenced girl in you to play and become the fountainhead of your joy, splashing and purging you off the thick dust you don't need? Dear woman, are you planting your feet in the forest of your dreams, stretching arms for your fingers to alchemize into fireflies, enough to illumine your garden and make ash of the axe holders? Dear woman, are you growing flowers on your tongue and loudspeakers on your ears to be velvety soft deep inside and to bounce back all you are told in nooks and books, in books and nooks of a world tailored to fit but not your size? Dear woman, are you measuring your fragility by stone and density by petals? In short, dear fellow woman, are you already becoming your own man? Okay, I think I still do have time. So I would like to talk about a bit more about language and female language. I was thinking about, I read long time in my college about this pen penis envy, that is the theory of pen penis envy by Sigmund Freud. And it says that, when a little girl, she looks at the penis of her brother, there is an interiorization of inferiority complex in her. So when she grows up and when she writes for the women writers, this writing down is like the projection of that penis, and it is like her overcoming her inferiority complex. Now, I think this theory is bullshit. It's totally baseless. I mean, if I hypothetically say that a little boy becomes complex when he says his mother's when he sees his mother has boobs and father doesn't have, and then when he grows up to become a writer, he's also overcoming some kind of inferiority complex or some kind of lack that he has, is trying to compensate for that by writing. You would completely discard me. It is completely nonsense. It's totally nonsensical. So I don't think that women write or they use the language to overcome some inferiority complex. They do use the language to voice their concerns, right? To speak about them that has not been spoken so far, that had they have been excluded from the narrative, so they have their own narrative, and their narrative not necessarily always excludes men. This poem that I read, the last poem I read, Letter to Women, I had two responses to this poem. A male friend read and he said, but why do you want to build a separate world for women? I said, no, I'm not talking about a separate world for women. I'm talking about the world for women where she's independent. That doesn't mean a separate world. But in men's language, when we talk about ourselves and we are trying to create something which is against them, which is distance from them, I don't think I would like to only women's library. In fact, when I used to teach in India, I remember my classes in Amateur University. This management students. So it really used to pain me to see men standing. All the girls would be on one side and men on one side, and I would say, no. When you're sitting in this class, I want your minds open, because when you already put yourself into categories, then your minds are closed and you can't really learn. So please, I want one boy, one girl, one boy. We think that a woman language is a language that the language of women, of course, she voices her concern, but she's not trying to create exclusive categories where she wants to leave her male counterpart. So I think I must get back to you to for a question answer round. I think I'm done with my time. Thank you. Thank you, Debali.
Thank you, ma'am. Uh, all of your poems were, I mean, very engaging. I mean, I think we have had a good round of poetry session today, and absolutely very engaging and very deep things that you have talked about here. Um, so I think we'll proceed with the Q&A session. So coming to you, Shelly, ma'am. Um, so since you talked about gendered language and how a male would write about a certain female experience, and then how a woman would write about that, so I actually wanted to know more about, I mean, I your perspective on this. Why do you think that, I mean, how do you think gender uh, affects the language or the interpretation and the analysis of a text?
Okay. Uh, See, gender definitely plays a role. All read the same thing differently, not only as individuals or as an Indian, a Brazilian, as nationals. We not only read from our cultural backgrounds, but we also read as our genders, who we are, right? Uh, as I said that, we made language very binary. We don't think about the third gender. So imagine when the third gender is reading a text where everything is he or she, right, and doesn't speak to that person. So definitely the reading by the third gender would be very different of this text where it's only about men and women and not about the two or the third gender, right? So it definitely plays a role. It also depends like how you're reading the text, what stage of your being you are at. If you are at the active stage of your being, the active stage of being a female, which is feminist, I would read a text very differently. In fact, I'm reminded about a panel that we had in Delhi in 2016 or early 17. This was actually book launch. If I remember it well, it was Keki Daruwala's book, Daniel Comes to Judgment. It was his book launch. And there was a female panelist. I would not name her. So in this book, during this book launch, she interpreted one story. So see, here we have the story where there's a female narrator, right? And this female narrator is portrayed by a male writer who's Keki Daruwala. And the panelist, she tells him that the voice of the female in this particular text is not a female voice, right? So it really triggered some thoughts in me that when we talk about, we have mother-in-laws, you know, who have gone through some sufferings where they have been silenced, where they have been, pushed to the wall, they have been made invisible. But when they become mother-in-law, they begin to reinforce the male voice. When they are silencing their daughters, asking them not to, as mothers, not to be too loud or to learn some feminine graces. And as mother-in-laws, when they expect their daughter-in-law to always cook and always please their husband, you know. So how can we say that this okay? Here we have a female, but she's not a feminist, right? She's projecting the same feminine ideas on the daughter and daughter-in-law that were projected on her, and these are she's a female with a male voice. I would not say male voice, that's the wrong word, sorry. She's a female with a chauvinist idea, right? So I think it really depends. It's very relative. I can't say that all women read alike. We can't say that. It really depends on your stage of being, how aware you are. So you read accordingly. Your reading of a text will actually tell if you are doing an essentialist reading, where you are looking at uh, text from traditional viewpoint, language as a, it must reflect the hierarchy, the gender hierarchy, or you actually are reading as a feminist. Feminist, even males are feminist. We have I have many. My husband is a feminist. He's a male and he's feminist. Yeah. So if you're reading as a feminist, you're reading from the political perspective. So it really depends. So there's no general definition or general code about you reading as a woman or man. It really depends on your level of awareness. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
And maybe if you allow me to add, that if we say that literature, it's sort of see, we have history books, but we don't have people's history. People's history we find in literature, right? We find it in historical fiction. We find people's history in poetry. There we have the record of the conscience of society. And in this conscience of society, woman has historically cut a very sorry figure who's mostly missing. And she should feel guilty if she doesn't want to be missing. She should feel guilty if she's on the forefront. So that definitely the language that we read, the text that we read, the literature that we read, there we can have these language is a code, and there we can definitely, as informed reader, as a reader who is reading with the antennas of the brain on, we can definitely we can skin the language, and we can see what is behind that language, those words, what ideas are there, where is it coming from, what is it trying to say, what is it trying to what norm it's trying to create, and then we can fight against those norms if these are not healthy norms for the society as a whole.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, we'll move on to Professor Debali. Um, so I think I mean, since you talked about poetry, but I'll be shifting a bit from the poetry aspect, and I'll talk about, rather, I'd like to ask about your book. So, in your book, Literature, Gender, and the Trauma of Partition, The Paradox of Independence, you have delivered a complex understanding of how partition, experiences of violence, migration, and displacement have shaped post colonial societies and subjectivities in South Asia. So, amidst all of that, what do you think is a very overlooked or very neglected narrative when it comes to partition and when it comes to the particularly violence against the South Asian female body?
Thank you. And Shelly, I want to thank you for your lovely poems. Really enjoyed them. Of course, they give a lot of food for thought. So thank you. Now, Sarannaya, to get to your question, one of the things that's I'm going to focus a little bit on the Bengal region, which by and large in the scholarship on partition has, until fairly recently, has been mostly neglected by critics. And this has led to quite a bit of misinformation, where people have claimed that it really did not have much of an impact. It's actually the critical engagement that's missing rather than people writing on it. So, one of the areas that has not been really explored too much is that of violence done to women. And in my book, I talk about Jyotirmoy Devi's writing, her novel Iparganga Oparganga, which has been translated as The River Churning, where she talks about the double violence done to this character, Shutara Dotto. On the one hand, there's the sexual violence performed on her by the enemy. On the although it's a Muslim family, I mean, she's a Shutara Dotto is a young Hindu girl living in what will eventually become East Pakistan. But the novel is set uh, in 1946, the backlash against the Great Calcutta killing. But anyway, well, this is for those who do not know the novel. Or have not read the novel yet. So Shutara endures violence in the hands of the enemy. On the other hand, when she is restored to her family in Kolkata, a family that's actually very reluctant to take her back, she undergoes this time psychological violence, the violence of being rejected. The family does not want to accept her because she has been touched and touched by the enemy. And so this is of course this uh, violence against the body that Jyotirmoy Devi explores. But there is also other kinds of violence against the body that need not necessarily be sexual violence. For instance, in the short story March or Fish, this young woman Monorama, she is actually torn between these two uh, forces. One on the one hand is the question of her happiness. On the other hand is the question of her duty as a daughter. And she is a young woman and the only person in the family who makes a living, and so the family depends on her living, on her earnings. So on the one hand is, should she think about her happiness alone and be with Bijon, whom she loves and who promises her a life of happiness, of joy, of marital bliss, or should she devote her earnings entirely to the well-being of her family? And so this is a kind of violence. I mean, she becomes a martyr to the family, and by remaining single. And this is actually something we have also seen in Ritik Ghotuk's film Meghe Katara, because Nita decides, she just decides to work and work and work until she contracts tuberculosis. Her mother destroys the possibility of her romance with Shonot. Because if Nita marries Shonot, she'll take her income with her, her salary with her, and the family will be left absolutely penniless and starving. So this is a kind of violence also. But there are other narratives sort of which combine this trauma and triumph, and I want to actually mention over here, this is not something I explored in my book. I didn't talk about the other story in my book either, but this is something I would like to explore in the future. For instance, someone like this young woman Aruti Das, who came to India from East Pakistan with her parents soon after partition. Aruti Das is actually much, much better known as Calcutta's cabaret queen, Miss Shefali. And Miss Shefali, she was at the age of 11, she went to work as a domestic servant. And then then came the opportunity of professional dancing, and she decided to become a professional dancer at Furpose restaurant in Calcutta. And later, of course, she'll migrate to the Grand, then to Hotel Hindustan, come back to the Grand, etc. But she was shamed for what she was doing. But it is actually her salary that fed her parents, her grandmother, and her younger brother. She had two other older sisters, one of whom was married, and the other one chose to remain with relatives in East Pakistan when her parents migrated. But this is the kind of violence done to her body as well, because she would be she would receive so much slander for the job that she was doing. But uh, so I see this as a kind of violence to the female body, and these narratives, which have not been really sort of foregrounded in my Miss Shefali, recently there, after Miss Shefali published her autobiography, Shondharate Shefali, or the Nightfall Shefali, or the Nightfall Jasmine, there has been some interest. And Uishika Chakraborty has written a very good uh, essay on her. She has also written a book, Bangali Jaunata, etc. But I haven't had the opportunity to read the Bengali book because it's not available in this country, in the US, and I plan to get it the next time I'm in India. But people like Ms. Shefali, their lives have not been explored. They are also victims of.
Sorry.
Thank you, ma'am. I think when you mention about this doubly, you know, this double violence of the mind and of the body, I think one of the very seminal works that we come across is Amrita Pritam's Pinjar,
Oh, yeah,
because even there we see this woman, a girl rather,
yes.
who becomes a woman rather. So she, after she is abducted and by a Muslim man, she is a Hindu girl, and then she is returned. Then she escapes this man and she returns, but her parents refuse to accept her because she is spoiled,
Yeah.
or because she is nurturing a worm in the womb, because she got pregnant. Um,
Mhm.
so thank you for mentioning that, and I think we'll move on to uh, Shelly ma'am.
Mhm.
So this is a personal question, and this is absolutely your opinion, but what do you feel, I mean, what are the changes, rather, that you would like women writers to approach, or rather take up, um, when we are talking about modern women writing? What are the changes that you wish to see?
Well, that question, okay, it's a good question. Thank you so much. See, I'd like to see women create a world that is absolutely inclusive. You know, I don't think it's important to counter all the time. It's important to dialogue. It's important to it's very important to make this world more inclusive. That's one thing that I think is very important. Today when I speak to my friends feminists, I'm also feminist. So it does not really mean that when you become feminist that you want that you must totally disregard your female body in terms of wanting to be a male. No, you can you when I say wanting to be a male, I mean in terms of biology. See, my body is fragile in certain places. It is fragile, and I value that, and I take care of that fact. I do not want to alter that fact. I don't want to be a wannabe, tomboy. No, I don't want to be that. Unless I feel masculine about myself, that's a different thing. But I really think that it's very important to be realistic, and not to be that extreme feminist where you want to leave behind your brothers, your fathers, your husbands. Because if we do that, then we are actually doing exactly what was done to us. We are replicating that inclusiveness, that category where you are just exclusive, where you are just making one category, leaving out the others. That's one thing that I would really, really like. That's my message to modern women writers. That's what I try to do, because we do have this kind of rage in us. we do have this anger in us. Sometimes I do feel upset that this, despite when I have a husband who's so supportive and we have our like we're family members, but I do get that rage that no, I have to compromise on my career, I have to leave up my country, and I have to reestablish myself. I have to start from the scratch again. Now this rage can become very destructive if I do not think through it. If I just act very impulsively, it can become very destructive, and it can also become very constructive. And when actually I think through it very wisely, then I see my male counterpart, my brother, my father, my husband, my male colleagues just stand with me. So that's one thing that I do think it's very important. Even if I talk about, are you becoming your own man, dear woman, are you becoming your own man? Even when I talk about it, I don't think it's important that you have to leave your man behind. It's just that you have to be independent, and you can be independent when you are with somebody. That's my important message, and that's what I really wish, that women writing is a writing which does does all that. It's self representation in that writing. It counters sexual politics. It does help women carve a niche for herself in the social political realms. It allows her to speak for her sisters, like in places like Afghanistan. And it is something that makes a gender language gender free. At the same time, it is not supposed to be writing that is only women's space. That's what I think is very important for women writers to understand, not to replicate the old categories, not to be in a battle, but to be in a dialogue. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. I think we actually had a panel with a panel titled "Women's Language of Rebellion" about, on 28th, and we had Malashri Lal ma'am as one of the panelists there, and she talked of a very similar thing about this collaborative rather than
Yes.
confronting nature of women, and there she talked about this. I absolutely cannot recall the name of this novel, but there she talks about a character, a Rajasthani woman who, uh, she is liberated in her mind, but she also is not. She doesn't confront in a very aggressive way, but rather she manages to educate children in the house itself. And
Yes.
since the children are not allowed to be left alone, she also starts a kind of a tuition center for the young women of the house as well. So that is how I think she with a she absolutely collaborates in bringing change, because if you kind of oppose, then it's like a battle. Then you'll
Yes.
not be able to do what you're supposed to. Okay, so I think since Debali ma'am also talked about this genre of this South Asian woman, um, but rather in the context of partition, I'd like to ask your opinion rather on the modern South Asian woman. Where do you place her and the sensibilities attached to the modern South Asian woman uh, in the world around us?
You asking me, Dibali? You asking me?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Can
yeah.
can you repeat that question, please?
I'm asking, since Debali ma'am also talked about the South Asian woman, but in the context of partition, my question to you would be rather the South Asian woman in modern times. How do you see her, and how do you see the sensibilities attached to the South Asian woman?
Well, that's a tricky question because yeah, okay. So South Asian women in modern times, I think, I mean, now when we talk about, I would talk about the women I know, the women I have read, and like Koral Das Gupta, So I would talk about people like this. I think South Asian women is all out and about. She truly controls her life. She truly controls her narratives. And no, well, but when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about intellectuals, I'm talking about writers. There might be women there are actually women back in my hometown, in my village, who are still not there. But those who are educated and who have had the privilege of education and who have reached the place where they can speak for others, I think South Asian women, they are using their own tradition, their own culture as they're not abandoning it. They are using it, they are refurnishing it with new meanings and new layers. Like Coral books, Sati series, for example, you see women, but don't see women who are not, who cannot speak for themselves. You don't see women we have always seen these women from very stereotypical eyes, but here you see women not only through, we do see through stereotypes, but you also see things that were invisible in the past, that were made invisible but very much there, where the women have their own strength. So I think that is kind of South Asian woman, that is the strength of the South Asian woman, where she's not abandoning her tradition, she's not abandoning her roots. She's soaking the best from everywhere, and she is truly leading the world, and she's leading her country, she's leading the world. I think that's very important. And I think I have to think through this question to answer it properly, so my answer is very incoherent. Yeah, so, but yeah, I do think that South Asian women writers are doing really good, and they are being themselves. They're not just, because what I see many, I have seen it in the past, that the what happens, I live in Brazil, and I have seen that this part of the world, people are very fascinated by the exotic Indian women, or by the the Oriental. They're very fascinated, and sometimes they want to give up themselves, and they just want to wear Indian clothes. And but that's more of a fascination, that's more of a romance. And likewise, I see that many women in India, they give up their, they have a problem with wearing salwar kameez and saris, and they want to be modern, they want to dress up like, they used to want to wear modern clothes, they want to be more westernized. I think that's not necessary. You have to be who you are, which I do see. When I say that some women, I have seen that they have wanting to be more vested than themselves. But I have seen more South Asian women who are themselves, and yet they have the best of the Western world in them. They absorb the best influence. They have not left their own essence, in kind of in wanting to be modern. So yeah, that's what have to say.
Thank you, ma'am. So we have a few more minutes left. So I think we can still take one or two more questions. Uh, my question to Professor Debali would be, this too is a very personal one, since you are a writer yourself. Um, what is your advice to young women writers out there?
Um, First, let me just say something at this point. I'm more of a researcher, a scholar, rather than a writer. I've translated works, but I'm not what I mean is I'm not a creative writer like Shelley is. But insofar as what I would like to see in women's writing is it's something that's already there, but courage. I would like them to be able to feel free to express themselves. But then it also needs an environment that can sustain that. For instance, I mean, and this is regardless of whether the writer is a man or a woman, the issue of safety. I mean, when I think about a woman writer who's who who has been constrained the by everything outside her and outside of her control. And I would think of Taslima Nasreen, the Bangladeshi writer, who has been on the run now for so many years, for almost 3 decades. Even before that, after she published selected columns or Nirvachito column, there were protests on the streets of Dhaka. But after she gave that interview to the Statesman, I mean, there are bounties on her head. Her books are regularly banned, and there are death threats. And again, this is not restricted just to women. I mean, when the secular blogger, what's his name? Obhijit Roy, he published Bishashir virus, the virus of faith. He was hacked to death in Bangladesh when he visited for the formal book launch. And after that, there were 3 other secular bloggers and Obhijit Roy's publisher who met with the same fate. And then Taslima Nasreen received a death threat, and she had to be removed. She was anyway in exile. She was living in India at this time, but there were riots in Kolkata in 2007. Protesting against her work, and when in 2015, after the deaths of the secular bloggers in Dhaka, she had to actually be removed from India as well. So she has been on the run for most of her writing life, for most of her, since she was a young woman. And so, what I wish for writers, again, regardless of it being a man or a woman, is an environment that will sustain, that will nurture their talent, an environment that is safe. And I wish them courage, plenty of courage. Of course, together with that, I hope there will be book publishers, there will be blue book clubs, there will be sessions like the one you are running, where young women will be able to present their work for a larger public. I mean, I enjoyed Shelley's poems so much, but that is really thanks to you, thanks to TYMS, that I was able to hear the poet deliver her poems. So I think venues like this would actually be very important for young upcoming writers. I mean, it doesn't have to be necessarily young for writers. I think things like panels like this would actually really help them. Public readings, and of course, support from the publishing industry. Uh, so, yes, these are things I would wish for a writer, for any writer.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was lovely to hear. I think we are out of time. So, with this, we come to the end of our session. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to Professor Debali Mookerjea-Leonard and Shelly Bhoil, ma'am, for this remarkable session. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight.